What if the most dangerous weapon in the Iran conflict is not a missile, a fighter jet, or a bunker-busting bomb? What if it is a material hidden somewhere beneath hundreds of meters of rock? A material that cannot be easily moved, cannot be easily destroyed, and cannot be ignored. Deep beneath the mountains of central Iran, there is a strategic question that has turned into one of the most dangerous calculations in modern warfare. Where is the uranium? Because the world is no longer only asking whether Iran can build a nuclear weapon. The world is asking something more complicated. Can a country survive when the very thing it built to guarantee its security becomes the reason every major power wants to find it? For years, Iran's nuclear program was designed around one central idea: survival through uncertainty. Hide the facilities, disperse the technology, bury the infrastructure. Create enough ambiguity that any attacker would have to think twice before acting. But here is the contradiction. The deeper Iran buried its nuclear capability, the more important it became, and the more vulnerable it became to the one thing even mountains cannot completely hide forever: attention. Because in modern warfare, a target does not always become valuable because of what it can destroy. Sometimes it becomes valuable because everyone is afraid of what might happen if it survives. And that is where the story of Pickaxe Mountain begins. Not as a simple bunker, not as a nuclear facility, but as the center of a much larger strategic struggle. A struggle between air power and underground protection, between intelligence and secrecy, between military force and political survival. On satellite images, the mountain does not look like the beginning of a global crisis. There are no giant missile towers, no visible armies, no dramatic battlefield stretching across the horizon. Just rock, a quiet landscape outside. Iran's no nuclear infrastructure, but beneath that surface may exist one of the most heavily protected strategic locations in the region. Because the real battlefield is not always where explosions happen. Sometimes it is where the explosions are trying to reach, and that changes everything. The facility believed to be hidden beneath this mountain represents a new generation of military challenge. A target designed around a simple question. What happens when the enemy's most important asset is placed somewhere conventional weapons were never designed to reach? The answer is not just a bigger bomb. It is a completely different way of thinking about war. To understand why this mountain matters, we have to go backward, before the bunker, before the threats, before the aircraft were preparing for possible missions. The story begins with uranium, not oil, not territory, not even missiles. Uranium because, unlike a missile battery or an aircraft base, enriched uranium represents something different. It represents potential, a physical asset that can change a country's strategic position without ever being launched. And that is exactly why it became the center of the conflict. For years, Iran expanded its nuclear infrastructure while insisting that its program was designed for peaceful purposes. International governments remained skeptical. The concern was not only what Iran had built, the concern was how quickly that capability could potentially change. Because nuclear strategy is often not about what a country has today. It is about what a country could create tomorrow. The gap between capability and weaponization became the battlefield. And that gap created fear on every side. Then came the air campaign. The world watched as American and Israeli aircraft targeted Iran's nuclear infrastructure. The strikes represented one of the most complex demonstrations of modern air power. Long-range aircraft, advanced intelligence networks, precision weapons designed to defeat hardened targets. The message was clear. Even underground facilities were not completely beyond reach. For a moment, many observers believed the problem had been solved. The visible infrastructure had been damaged. Facilities had been hit. The images showed destruction. But here is the problem. A war can destroy buildings. It cannot always destroy what it cannot locate. And that distinction became the most important detail in the entire conflict, because before the strikes happened, another story was unfolding: movement, transportation, preparation. Satellite analysts noticed unusual activity around sensitive locations, vehicles moving near underground entrances, changes in patterns, signs that Iran may have anticipated the possibility of attack. The part most people miss is this: the most important battle may have happened before the first bomb ever fell. Not in the sky, not underground, but inside intelligence networks trying to answer one question: did Iran protect the material that mattered most? Because destroying a nuclear facility is one challenge. Finding the nuclear material before it disappears is another. And that second problem is far harder. This created the first major contradiction of the conflict. The United States possessed some of the most advanced strike capabilities on Earth, but Iran's greatest advantage was not stronger weapons. It was uncertainty. The ability to make the enemy ask, did we actually hit the right target? Did we destroy the important material? Or did we only destroy the visible part of the problem? This changes everything, because modern warfare is no longer only about destruction. It is about confidence. A military can win a bombing campaign and still lose the information war if it cannot prove the mission achieved its purpose. And that is why attention shifted toward Pickaxe Mountain. The mountain was not important because it was large. It was important because of what it represented: a protected location, a hardened facility, a possible final hiding place for material that had become the center of international pressure. Built into solid rock, the location presented a different kind of challenge. The United States had developed weapons specifically designed for deeply buried targets, including the massive GBU-57 bunker penetrator, a weapon created for a battlefield where ordinary bombs were no longer enough. But here is the contradiction: the stronger underground defenses become, the more expensive the solution becomes. A bunker is not only protection, it is a strategic calculation, because every layer of rock forces the attacker to ask, how much force is enough? How many weapons are required? What happens if the first strike fails? And what happens after the strike? A mountain can protect a facility, but it cannot protect a country from every consequence, because the uranium question is connected to something much larger: energy, trade politics, and global pressure. The conflict surrounding Iran is not happening in isolation. It exists near one of the world's most important energy corridors: the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway where a regional confrontation can quickly become a global economic problem. Oil markets do not only respond to explosions, they respond to uncertainty. A single threat to shipping can change prices thousands of miles away. A single military decision can affect industries on another continent. The battlefield is local, the consequences are global. And this creates another contradiction. Iran's strategy has long relied on the ability to create pressure without necessarily fighting a full conventional war-use geography. Use proxies, use uncertainty, create enough risk that opponents hesitate. But the same strategy has a weakness. The more uncertainty Iran creates, the more justification it gives others to apply pressure. The weapon becomes the argument against the country using it. This is why the uranium hidden beneath a mountain matters so much. It is not simply a nuclear issue. It is not simply a military target. It is a test of a larger question. Can modern states use secrecy as protection in an age where satellites, intelligence networks, and precision weapons are constantly searching because the battlefield has changed? The strongest fortress is no longer just the one that can survive an attack. It is the one that can prevent the enemy from understanding what remains after the attack. And Iran's biggest problem may be that the world no longer needs to prove the mountain exists. It only needs to believe what might be inside. But that leads to the deeper question. Because everyone is looking at the mountain. Everyone is watching the bombs. Everyone is counting missiles. But what if they are all focusing on the wrong battlefield? Because the real war may not be about destroying a bunker. It may be about controlling uncertainty itself. And that is where this conflict becomes much bigger than one mountain. In Iran, everyone thinks this battle is about a mountain, a bunker, a stockpile of uranium hidden beneath layers of rock. But the real battle is about something much harder to destroy: control. Control of information, control of time, control of escalation. Because in modern warfare, the side that controls the battlefield is not always the side with the biggest bomb. Sometimes it is the side that forces the other side to make decisions without complete information. And that is exactly the strategic trap surrounding Pickaxe Mountain. The mountain is only the physical location. The real battlefield exists above it. Inside intelligence centers, inside government meetings, inside financial markets, inside the minds of decision makers trying to calculate the consequences of the next move. The United States faces a problem that every advanced military eventually encounters. Firepower can destroy, but firepower cannot answer every question. A bomb can collapse a tunnel. It cannot automatically reveal whether the target was empty before impact. A missile can destroy infrastructure. It cannot guarantee that the strategic objective disappeared with it. This is the invisible battlefield, the war between what can be seen and what must be assumed. And that difference is where modern conflicts are often decided. Imagine a command center late at night. Satellite images are projected across a large screen. Analysts are studying shadows, road patterns, construction changes, vehicle movement. Every small detail becomes a piece of a larger puzzle. Because the question is no longer simply, can we destroy this location? The question becomes, do we understand what this location actually means? That distinction separates tactical victory from strategic success. A tactical strike destroys a target. A strategic victory changes the enemy's ability to continue. And those two outcomes are not always the same. This is why underground facilities are such a difficult challenge. The mountain is not just physical protection. It is psychological protection. It creates doubt. And doubt has value. A hidden capability forces an opponent to spend resources preparing for possibilities. More surveillance, more aircraft, more intelligence operations, more military deployments. The facility does not need to be used to create pressure. Its existence alone creates pressure. The uncertainty becomes the weapon. But here is the problem. The same uncertainty that protects Iran also creates a permanent crisis, because countries can tolerate many disagreements. They can negotiate over sanctions. They can negotiate over trade. They can even negotiate over military presence. But uncertainty around nuclear material creates a different calculation, because nuclear strategy is built around worst-case scenarios. Not because every scenario will happen, but because the cost of being wrong is considered unacceptable. That changes the entire equation. The lesson here is important. In traditional warfare, armies fight for territory. In modern strategic competition, nations often fight over perception. What does the enemy believe? What can the enemy verify? What risks will the enemy accept? The mountain matters because nobody outside a small group can, and that uncertainty creates a permanent strategic pressure point. But the story does not end underground, because the hidden battlefield extends far beyond the mountain. It reaches into energy markets. A conflict involving Iran is never only about Iran. The Persian Gulf remains one of the most important economic regions on Earth. Every day, enormous volumes of energy move through narrow maritime routes. A disruption does not require a full-scale war. Sometimes the threat of disruption is enough. A tanker changing direction, an insurance company increasing costs, a shipping company delaying operations, a market reacting before anything physically happens. The battlefield moves faster than the military. This creates another contradiction. Iran's geographic position gives it influence, But that same geography creates vulnerability. The same waterways that provide strategic leverage also connect Iran to the global economy. The same pressure tools that can threaten others can also isolate Iran itself. A country can create risk for the world, but it can also become trapped by the consequences of that risk. And that is the difficult balance facing Tehran, because military power is not measured only by weapons. It is measured by endurance. How long can a country continue? How much economic pressure can it absorb? How much political disagreement can its leadership survive? How much uncertainty can its population tolerate? A missile launch lasts seconds, a financial crisis lasts years, and history repeatedly shows that wars are often decided by the systems behind the battlefield: factories, supply chains, energy revenue, political stability, public confidence, the invisible machinery that keeps a state functioning. The part most people miss is that Iran's nuclear strategy was never only about uranium. It was about deterrence. The idea that uncertainty itself could prevent an attack. If opponents believe there is a hidden capability, they may hesitate. If they cannot know the full extent of that capability, they must calculate more carefully. But deterrence has a dangerous weakness. It depends on the opponent believing the risk is manageable. Once the uncertainty becomes too large, the same deterrence mechanism can become a reason for escalation. This is the paradox at the center of the conflict. Iran wants the world to fear what it might possess, but the world fears exactly that possibility. The same ambiguity that creates leverage also creates suspicion. The same secrecy that protects the program also makes diplomacy harder. The same underground facility designed to prevent destruction may increase the pressure to strike. And this is where technology changes the equation. Decades ago, a mountain could provide enormous protection. Distance mattered, visibility mattered, precision was limited. But modern warfare operates differently. Satellites watch continuously. Artificial intelligence helps analyze patterns. Precision weapons reach targets once considered unreachable. Cyber operations can disrupt systems without a single aircraft crossing a border. The battlefield is becoming less about physical access. It is becoming about information dominance. Who sees first? Who understands faster? Who makes decisions with greater confidence? Strategically, this changes how nations think about security. A country can build deeper bunkers, but it cannot completely bury its strategic problems, because every defensive measure creates a new question. Every new layer of protection creates a new challenge. Every attempt to hide capability creates more attention toward finding it. The fortress becomes the signal. The silence becomes the message. And this is not only an Iranian problem, it represents a larger challenge for the future of warfare around the world. Nations are investing in hardened facilities, underground command centers, cyber defenses, and advanced weapons. The reason is simple. Modern weapons are becoming more precise, but modern states are becoming more dependent on fragile systems, energy networks, communication networks, financial systems, industrial supply chains. The next major conflicts may not begin with armies crossing borders. They may begin with attempts to create uncertainty inside these systems. The bigger picture is that Pickaxe Mountain represents a new era of strategic competition, an era where the most important targets may not be the ones that explode. They may be the ones that force everyone to prepare for the possibility that they could. A hidden facility can influence decisions before it is ever attacked. A weapon can create fear before it is ever fired. A capability can change global calculations before it is ever used. That is the power of strategic ambiguity. But ambiguity also has limits. Eventually, every country faces the same question. How much uncertainty can the world tolerate before uncertainty itself becomes the threat? Because there is a point where hiding a capability stops creating security and starts creating isolation. The question is no longer whether a mountain can survive a bunker-busting bomb. The real question is whether any nation can build a strategy around something the world is determined to uncover. Because the future of warfare may not belong only to the country with the strongest weapons. It may belong to the country that understands something even more important: how to control the information, economics, and political consequences that come before the weapons are ever used. So the final question is this: if future conflicts are decided less by who has the biggest weapon and more by who controls uncertainty, which side do you think has the real advantage? The nation hiding the capability, or the nations trying to reveal it?